A lot of people have been asking about all the calculations on the Lajitata Avashta screen in KALA. So I wanted to jump in and kind of explain that screen a little bit better so that you know what to focus on for now and don't get too concerned about the things that we're not going to be covering at this time in this course. So basically you'll find this screen if you go to Screens, Lajitati Avashtas. And this is the new screen as per the KALA 2018 version. The most useful part, the part you're going to use the most in this screen, is this Lajitati Avashta screen, which is below the Rashi chart. And this shows the calculations of the good and bad Lajitati Avashtas, with the favorable Avashtas like delighted Avashta being in green, and the unfavorable Avashtas like the starvation and the agitation, those types of things, being in the red. And blue numbers are simply the influences of planets that are not helping the Lajitati Avashta or hindering the Lajitati Avashta of another planet. You can sort of just ignore those for the whole purpose of when you look at Lajitati Avashtas, they're just not important. The blue numbers are not taking part in any Avashta, okay? And what makes this table, first of all, there's a lot of stuff on this screen. There's a lot of stuff on this screen that I'm researching, I'm not even using on a regular basis. That's sort of there for research purposes. But I want to talk about that a little bit too, in case some of y'all want to play with those things too. The most basic option is when you're in the Drishti Yuti. And what this means is that it's simply taking the aspect or Drishti values from 0 to 60 of one planet to the other, and it's taken a yuti or a conjunction of planets being in the same sign, which is valued at 60 points, which is the same value as a full 100% aspect. You'll remember that full value is 60 points. That's considered a full measure. And then we have virupas, which are a 60th of a measure. So we show these numbers from 0 to 60, which are the virupas, and when you hit 60, it's called a rupa, or a full measure. And that's the numerical system that's used by Parashara for pretty much almost all his calculations, okay? It's always a 0 to 60 value. So the Drishti Yuti is real simple. All it does is it shows the aspect strength from 0 to 60. So here the sun's being aspected by the moon by 35.9 points, by Mars to 20.8 points, by Mercury it's a conjunction, so it gives 60 points. Jupiter's a conjunction, so it gives 60 points. Venus conjunct, so it gives 60 points. And Saturn is aspecting the 52.3 points. It's simply the aspect value. It's the same thing you would find if you went to aspects planetary. You would see Saturn's doing 52, Mars is doing 21, Moon's doing 36. And then we have three yutis, Mercury, Jupiter, and Venus, giving 60 points. Same values, it's just in this table we rounded the values off in the aspected planets, whereas the Lajitati Avashtas we calculate to 1 decimal point. Hardly matters. Okay, so that's really all you're looking at in this table. The planet itself is not getting a value. So the planet Sun starts out with no value, and it's just taking the influences, good and bad, and then you could kind of see, are there more favorable Lajitati Avashta influences or more unfavorable Lajitati Avashta influences? It's really the most simple, easiest on the eyes measurement that you can look at, okay? And I'll use this table a lot, actually. Lots of times I just want to get an idea of if the planet's more starved or delighted or whatever. And this is just a real easy way to see it. I can just say, oh yeah, Jupiter is agitated by the sun, but the sun is also a friend, so it gives 60 points. It's got its friend Moon helping the 33.5 points, Mars, its friend, helping the 22.7, Mercury and Venus starving it to 60, and Saturn is neutral, not helping it or hindering it Lajitati-wise, so it's a blue 51 that I can ignore. And when we add these values up, we're going to get, minus 61.9. So there's more starvation, negative influences thanks to Mercury and Venus both giving Jupiter a full dose of starvation, okay? And you can use this. If you really like the crunch numbers, you might want to use the Shadbala one. Okay, and I'll show that one next. But I want to explain a couple things just on the table, first of all. Sometimes you'll see two numbers. Okay, like Mercury is red by the sun and green by the sun. Well, the number on the right, if there's two numbers, the right-hand number is always going to be the starvation or the delight. Okay, if it's green, it's the delight or the mudita, and if it's red, as in Venus here to the sun, it's the starvation or shudita. Okay. The number on the left, if there's two numbers, is the number it's going to be getting from agitation and being ashamed. Because sometimes a planet can be agitated and ashamed, or agitated and delighted, and so on. So lots of times we need to have two numbers here. Okay? So, for instance, Mercury is agitated by the sun, but the sun is also a friend to Mercury, so delighting the sun. The right-hand number is always the delight and the starvation. The left-hand number is always the agitation and the and any shame that might be there. Okay, so keep that in mind. A little more advanced, we can click on this arrow here and we can scroll over to Shadbala. Now what we've done is we start with the Shadbala of every planet, and in the black, that's the planet's Shadbala value, just as you would see in the Shadbala tables. So that's its strength. And every planet has a minimum amount it needs to do its job and be happy at the end of the day. And if you pull up the Shadbala table, you'll see there's a percent of required, or the required. So the sun needs 390, Moon needs 360, Mars needs 300, Mercury needs 420, Jupiter needs 390, Venus needs 330, Saturn needs 300. So these are the strengths that each of the planets just need to fulfill their job. So if they have that Shadbala, they're going to be able to be happy enough to feel like their lives are okay and the things they rule are giving enough happiness that they're actually worth having and working with. Okay? Now, when we attach this, when we use Shadbala to examine the Lajitadya Avastas, we have the same scheme, the same red and green placements. It's just now the numbers are much different, usually much higher numbers, because we're taking the aspect and multiplying it times the Shadbala of the aspecting planet. And if the planet's a conjunct planet, we're taking its full Shadbala value and modifying the Shadbala of the person's planet. And if the person's planet gets lower than its minimum required, then that planet's going to be noticing a deficit at some times. So for instance, let's take Mercury here. On one hand, Mercury has 338 points of Shadbala. He's not really strong. In fact, if you go over to the Shadbala table and you see the minimum required for Mercury, we need a minimum of 420. So this Mercury is not going to be able to pull his own weight. Now, because he starts low, he needs 420, but he's only at 338. The sun agitates him to 473, which takes Mercury down to minus 135. So, at the wrong time in the person's life, that Mercury can be extremely agitated to the point of, falling apart. Okay? But at the other time of the life, the sun is also delighting Mercury to 473 points. And you add the 473 to the 338, and Mercury comes up to 811 points, which is plenty of points for Mercury to do his job. He only needs 420, so he's super delighted. Okay? Jupiter's helping Mercury to 362 points, which brings Mercury to 700. He's going to be delighted by Jupiter. So the Shadbala, the advantage it has over just using the Drishti Yutti value is that the value it has is that it lets us see if the planet has enough points after the delight and starvation factors to see if it has enough strength to still fulfill its role properly, which means does it still have enough of its Shadbala value? Okay. at that time. And again, these will be ups and downs throughout the life depending on which planet is actively influencing any other planet. So for an example, taking Saturn here. Saturn has 402 points of Shad Bala. He has plenty of Shad Bala to do his job. The Sun is going to starve Saturn to 229 points, which is going to leave him with 173. Not enough to do his job. So that's enough starvation to badly hamper Saturn. The Moon is aspecting Saturn to 125, which takes him to 276. Again, bad enough to really hamper him. So Saturn, all the planets starving him are starving him quite strongly, enough to take him below his minimum required. As a result, he's going to suffer at certain times. But of course, he's also getting friends of Mercury and friends from delight from Mercury, delight from Venus. So at times he's going to really do great because of all that delight. Okay? So in the end, his overall life, he'll do 321, which is sufficient. Okay? Because Saturn doesn't need much to do a good job. He just needs like 300 points to do a good job. So 321 will cut it. Let me make sure my memory is right. Sometimes I muddle those numbers up. Yeah, Saturn needs 300 along with Mars. They need the least amount. So Saturn's going to do well overall in the person's life, but at some time Saturn's going to really suffer because of the Sun, Moon, Mars starvations. But it'll balance out throughout the life. So the Shad Bala just lets us see a little bit more we can split the hairs more. Okay, if you just want to get a feel, use the quick and easy Drishti Yutti. If you want to split the hairs, use the Shad Bala. Some astrologers do better when they just get a feel of something mathematically, and then their intuition will jump in and take the reading home. Other people want to measure out the split hairs, and then you want to use the Shad Bala. Okay, but you can use either way that you want to do. I sometimes, depending on what mood I'm in, I'll use the Drishti Yutti or I'll use the Shad Bala values. Okay, so this chart, in a glance, we can see that all planets except Jupiter and Venus are going to have sufficient delight and nice avashtas to do a really good job, because they all but Jupiter and Venus end up having their required Shad Bala minimum met after all is said and done. Okay, so you can do a quick snapshot analysis like that, and right away the planets you got to focus on in this person's chart are Venus and Jupiter. Now, I use that word focus on. You have to focus on those. It doesn't mean that you want to guarantee that they're problematic and say, those parts of your life are going to absolutely suck, because Venus might be able to handle all that trouble in the Varga charts. Like in the Rashi chart, Venus is in its own sign. Good. That means he's going to handle a tremendous amount of trouble in the Rashi chart. And if we went and looked at the dignities and Vargas, and we looked at Venus, we can see in Venus is an own house, exalted ones, own house so many times, and only in an enemy sign 1, 2, 3, 4 times, that Venus isn't going to do as bad as it looks based on avashtas. Because you'll remember, if the planet's in good dignity in a particular Varga, if it's like, in a good Diptani avashta, like if it's exalted, it's in the it's in the Dipta, the radiant avashta, then it only gives all of its good points, of all of its delighted points. It doesn't give any of its starved points, right? So what I mean we have to do, if we see a low number, we need to focus on it. All right, so Venus, we need to focus on it. So in the Rashi chart, let's really look at Venus. So it's starved by the sun and agitated by the sun. It's starved by the moon. That's where he's getting a lot of trouble. But in the Rashi chart, Venus is in Swashta, which means he's going to give 100% of his delighted influences and none of his starved influences. So the starved of the sun, the starved of the moon isn't going to impact him. And Venus is actually going to do quite well. Okay? And he's going to have a lot of delight with Venetian things in his life. Okay? On a physical level. Now, on a physical level, Venetian things represent the appearance of your spouse. This person had an attractive woman in his life got a lot to offer. He definitely got a good deal with the woman he was with. And then, and Venus is the sixth lord, which has to do health. So this Venus definitely contributed to having a better vitality of health than you would expect, considering it's so starved. Because again, that starvation is not going to manifest in the Rashi chart because it's in its own sign. In the Hora chart, Venus is in its own sign. So again, in the context of making ends meet, managing their material lives, Venus is going to only give delight. It's only going to give good. Marriage, his marriages really supported him materially. It really was a beneficial thing for him to be married, believe it or not. Venus is the karaka of marriage, and it's strong in his financial chart. So by the time we look at all the charts, we can see that maybe Venus isn't that bad. So when you see the low number, don't just jump to the low number and start saying, oh God, your Venus sucks. No, this person's had some really good Venus stuff, because in a lot of Vargas, we saw here in the dignities and Vargas, Venus is in own house in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Vargas, and exalted in its most important Varga, the Navamsha. Okay? So it's all in all, in most Vargas, and not most, but a lot of Vargas, Venus is only giving its delighted value and none of its starvation values, right? So that's why when I started this course, I said we want to focus on the techniques and not just jump right into the math, because it's too easy to jump into the math and say, oh, Venus is trashed. Or, oh, Venus is trashed, don't ever fall in love. No, you wouldn't want to say that. So when you see a low number, it means you just have to analyze that planet carefully by looking at the Vargas, looking at its Diptadya Vashtas, and making sure that if it has good Diptadya Vashtas, that it's actually going to give good things in those Vargas. Yes, in the Vargas it's in bad dignities, it's going to give a lot of trouble. Okay? I'm going to talk about this person's chart more in the next video. For now, I'm just trying to really get you familiar with these tables. And most importantly, that means not having you fall into any pitfalls of jumping into conclusions before you focused on the planet. Okay? And even a really amazing planet like Mars was 961 points. Again, okay, that planet has a lot of potential, but how is it really going to be doing? Dignities and Vargas. Mars is in own house once, it's debilitated in the D30, it's debilitated in the D60, it's an enemy sign 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's in 8 Vargas, and half the Vargas, it's mostly going to give it starvation. Okay? So in those Vargas, look how badly it is starved by Mercury. It's going to fail in half the Vargas. So you can't get carried away by these numbers. In the end, you need to go look at the charts and see what's going on there. So rather than getting carried away by this number, a lot of times it's better to focus on the Drishtayutti number and just go, okay, all right, these are the values, it's starved. Mars is getting, delighted a lot, 60 by Jupiter, 50 by Sun, starved by Mercury. And now we're dealing with accidents, and we go to the Trim Samsha, and we see that Mars is beta, alarmed there, which is only going to give its bad avashtas, none of it's good. And so we realize that Mars is going to give quite a bit of trouble, because it's got 41 points of negativity from Mercury. And all planets start out with a symbolic 60 points, and you want them to have at least 30 points to manage. So when we take 60 minus 41.8, you're left with, about 19 points, 18.2 points. That's not a good Mars in the D30, okay? That's a bit of a scary Mars in the D30 when it comes to getting hurt. All right, so don't jump to conclusions with the numbers. The numbers are your foundation values to work on by analyzing the planet's Diptadya Vashtas. Very, very important, okay? And just to make sure you know what you're doing and you don't jump to numerical conclusions and make mistakes, I don't have the Diptadya value influence programmed into KALA, okay? I might do it at some point, but I think it's just important to look and know what you're doing. The reason for that is when you start looking at charts with some knowledge that you know, it gets your brain running with the chart. And all of a sudden you start connecting the dots and doing a real reading. Just looking at mathematical values and trying to spit out answers, you're not integrating with the chart and you won't give good readings. Okay? So it's important to work our way through the chart as I've shown you with the previous examples that we had and how also as I'll show you as we continue. Okay. So that's the difference primarily between the Drishti Yutti and the Shad Bala. You can use whatever one you want. If I do a chart and I use the Shad Bala, you can do the chart in the Drishti Yutti. It's fine. Or vice versa. You don't have to say, oh, Ernst did it this way when he looked at children, so I have to do it this way when I look at children. No. Use the values you want to use when you use them. Then we have a lot of other values. We have the Ishta. Ishta is a mix of Uchabala and Cheshtabala. Uchabala is how close the planet is to its deep exaltation point. Cheshtabala is basically when a planet's closest to the Earth and retrograde. It's always retrograde when closest to the Earth. Its Cheshta is the highest. And when it's behind the sun, set behind the sun in combustion, it's furthest from the Earth, and that's when its Cheshtabala is the lowest. Ishta is when we average the Cheshtabala and Uchabala. Okay? Then we have Veda is when Veda is a mythical number for the number 4. So by Veda, this doesn't mean the truth. This doesn't mean they're going to read a lot of good books from the old days. It means the number 4. So Veda means we took 4 values. In Ishta, we took 2 values, Ucha and Cheshta, which combined to create Ishta. In Veda, we took about 4 values. We took Uchabala, Cheshtabala, Digbala, and Shubha, Ashubha points, which are based on the dignities of a planet in the 7 Vargas. So there's 4 values combined into the Veda. Cheshta is simply the Cheshtabala, how close the planet is to Earth. Ucha is how close the planet is to exaltation. Dig is how much Digbala it has. And again, these measurements are always done 0 to 60. And Shubha is the Shubha value. So each of those 4 values, Shubha, Dig, Ucha, Cheshta, have to do with how a planet is trying to manifest a healthy life. Health, basically, the ability to survive healthily on this earth. And I programmed them into the Lajitariya Vashtas to use with some medical astrology stuff because I heavily use Ucha, Cheshta, Dig, and these 4 values in medical astrology, basically, because each of them represent a planet's, something the planet needs to do to maintain health in your system, and health mentally and health emotionally. And so, and I use them with the homeopathy stuff that I'm doing to help me guess how desperately, how deep the pathology of a planet has gotten to based on these 4 values, Uchabala and so on. So I wanted to watch them as modified by the Lajitariya Vashtas, so I programmed them into this table. But you don't need to use them unless you think of something you want to try using them on. Okay, so the research door is open on those. I'm using them to fine-tune some medical stuff, simply speaking, to see if a planet basically, on the level it's sick, let's say a planet is sick on the level of its Cheshtabala, then I want to see on the level of Cheshtabala its chances for getting healthy. And that'll be based on if it has friends with high Cheshtabala helping it. So for instance, Venus is helped by Mercury to 49.7 points here. Okay? Good, that's a lot of Cheshtabala. Venus starts out with just 10 Cheshtabala. That's low. Okay, so Venus's Cheshtabala is 10.9. That means its anti-Cheshtabala is 49.1. Because 10.9 and 49.1 is 60. With these 4 values, you always have the positive, and you always have the negative, which is the 60 minus the positive. So Overall, Venus has 38.2 more negative points than positive points. Okay, so Venus starts with a deficit in Chestabala of 38.2 points. Okay, so Venus is a really troubled planet Chestabala-wise. So on a level of Chesta, because it only has 10.9 points, Venus can get very ill. Okay, now on another level, on a level of Ucha, Venus has 46 points. So on a level of Ucha, Venus is going to be able to keep the person healthy. Now, if Venus is sick on the Chesta level, and I want to see the person's chances for recovery, I need to see how much help Venus is getting. And I see that Venus is giving Mercury 49.7 points. That's great. That helps Venus come out of the negatives and come back to 11.5. Any planet that can help Venus get out of the negatives, because Venus is at minus 38, is going to be a planet that's going to be able to help Venus. So I know the cure to Venus is going to come through Mercury. That if they do more Mercury, it'll help Venus get better. And I know that they can get better because of the fact that Mercury is helping Venus enough to bring Venus back to a positive value. That's all it has to do to get it above zero. Okay? Because the negative comes from Venus's plus 10 minus its minus 49. So I just have to get 38 points to help Venus. Saturn also helps it to 49. So I can counsel this person about how they use their Venus and counsel them to use more Mercury and more Saturn delighting Venus, and through that help their Venus health recover, for instance. Okay? And this gives me an idea that on the level of Chesta, Venus has some strong friends. But let's say that Venus's friends were weak in Chesta. They might be strong in Shadbala, but they may be weak in Chesta and not be able to help them enough. Okay? So on different levels, sometimes I want to break these things down. That's why I put them there. It's nothing I'm really teaching at this time. I don't have any future plans to teach it. It was something I would probably be teaching if at some point I teach the new medical stuff that I'm doing. Okay, but that's why I programmed all those. For the point of view of the predictive courses, the psychological courses, you can just ignore those values and pretend they're not there unless you want to play with them. If you know what those things are, you might come up with some cool ways to use those. So they're there if you want to. On the tables on the right, we only have two options, the Drishti Yutti and the Shadbala, because those tables are more like predictive centered, and so they only have those two options. There is no other option. Okay? So the values in the Shadbala and the Drishti Yutti are what are going to be the most used, that you're going to find yourself using all the time. In addition to that, we can do a lot of other things with these tables. For instance, we can take the sun, and we can see the sun's influence to all the houses, which is the top row, and how that influence changes based on being delighted by the moon or starred by Venus. So when starred by Venus, these are the values the sun is going to give to the houses. When delighted by the moon, these will be the values the sun gives to those houses. And that's just a further way to kind of see what's a planet doing exactly. How much is it helping or hindering something? Okay? It's simply the planet's influences to the houses. Then we have the BH, which stands for Bhava, where we can select a Bhava, say second, and we can look at all the planets influencing the second Bhava. And we can say, oh, okay, the last planet influencing the second Bhava, let's find the best number here, is 650 for Jupiter delighted by the sun. So when they go into Jupiter Sun Dasha, the second house is going to get a lot of delight to it from Jupiter. Okay? So that's when you want to kind of see how the influence is spread through the chart. It's not the most important thing, and I suggest you utterly ignore those things until you really start learning how to just read the chart with these other tables. Then the Rahu and Ketu, we simply take Rahu and we see the influences. Sun doesn't influence Rahu at all. Causes no aspect, no conjunction. The moon influences Rahu on a delighted way because of the moon and delighted way by Mercury. Mars influences Rahu sometimes in a delighted way and sometimes in a negative way. So when they're running Mars, Mercury, you know that Rahu is going to be under more pressure. Rahu is going to struggle more. Okay? And you'll remember that Rahu always gives the results of the planets aspecting them. So if they're running Rahu, Mars, Mercury, Rahu is going to be more strained than when they're running Rahu, Mars, Sun. Rahu dasha is going to be a lot better. Okay? Because Rahu dashas give so many ups and downs because they take on all these influences from everything influencing them. But again, those are more like splitting the hairs. And first you have to learn to see the big, solid things. Then you can add further interpretations if you want to split the hair using these buttons. But like I said, it's most important to learn to read the chart with taking the avashtas, seeing what the planets are ruling, and then looking at the deep-tadi avashtas of the planet to see how much the lajitadi avashta is going to be coming through into the person's life due to circumstances. Okay? That's what you have to learn how to see. That's going to be the big stuff. And then these little buttons up here are just to see the influences of that planet in that condition, how it's throwing those influences throughout the chart. Think it's not that important. If you know it's doing great in that Varga, because it's delighted in that Varga, got good deep-tadi avashtas that allow that delight to come through, then you know it's doing good in that Varga. If you want to split hairs and see which houses are going to do the best in that Varga, that's when you push these other buttons. Okay? All right. Then over on the right, we have the tables that are very similar. We show the Drishti Yuti and the Shadbala values. Okay? And we have the same buttons, except we have one extra one, two extra ones. One is MUAG for Mutual Agenda. That pulls up the Mutual Agenda charts, which simply shows us what every planet rules or has the ability to manifest. So the Sun rules the 9th cusp, the 9th Lord. It rules it's the 10th from the AMK and stuff. It basically tells you what the planet rules. So it lets us see what possible things the planet can manifest. And it's just a table to help you see that. I like looking at the charts a lot, just seeing it in the charts, but it helps as beginners to sort of look at the tables. We'll probably go through these tables more at some point. That's the button that pulls up the table. Okay, then what this table does that's different than this is it takes the Vimshopaka relevant to that Varga. Now, what's really happening is you go and you look at a planet. Like let's say we take, let's take Mars in the Trim Samsha. And we know that Mars in the Trim Samsha is in the sign of Cancer. It's debilitated, so it's a beta alarmed, which means it's only going to give its starvation. It's not going to give any delight. So this 362 it's getting from Jupiter, it's not getting that in the Trim Samsha. This 395 from the Sun, it's not getting that in the Trim Samsha. What's it getting in the Trim Samsha? The minus 235 of starvation from Mercury. Okay? So Mars is simply going to be starved in the Trim Samsha. And he's not going to do good there. He's going to be a troublesome planet because of that. Now, if we look at Mars here, we see that Mars has a Vimshopak of 10.5. That means the percentage of the starvation it's going to get is going to be it's going to be 9.5 divided by 20, because Vimshopak goes up to 20, right? So since Mars has a 10.5 Vimshopak, the feeling that he's going to give, the level of fulfillment will be 10.5 divided by 20, a little over half of any values, any good values he has. Okay? Now, the level of starvation is going to be 9.5. 20 minus 10.5, right? So the Vimshopak lets us see how troubled the planet's going to be in the Varga. Now, what's really happening is, in this Varga, Mars absolutely sucks, right? In this Varga, Mars is only giving bad. Like if I go to the Drishtayutti, the bad it's giving is 41.8. And it's only going to give that bad in this Varga, which means in the Trimsamsha, nothing good is going to happen. Nothing good's going to happen from Mars, because he has no capacity to give any delight or anything in the Trimsamsha. Okay? However, what he finally does in the Trimsamsha is not dependent only in the Trimsamsha chart. If it was, what I would have done is I wouldn't have the Vimshopak here. I would have simply taken the starvation of Mercury and used all of it, which was 41.8, and you would have seen 41.8 here, and that's it. Okay? However, I didn't do it that way, because while we know from interpretation that Mars is not going to be doing anything good in the Trimsamsha, Mars, the person can still hold their life together because of maybe what Mars is doing in other places. So for instance, Trimsamsha has to do with arishtas. You know, arishtas are fatalities, life trying to kill you. You know, the world's trying to kill you, right? Other things want to eat your food. Other people cause you stress at work because they want a better job. Other people, you know, it's a competitive, hard world and we struggle to survive. And this Mars has no capacity to help you, this person stay alive. Does that mean when Mars Dasha comes, they just go, okay, time to die, I'm done, I'm going to die? No. Because even though Mars doesn't help them stay alive, they might have other things in their life that make it worth living. So imagine a person who's gets shot, you know, gets shot 10 times. And there's no way he should live, right? He's got bullet holes all over him, but he has a desire to live that keeps him alive anyway. Maybe that desire to live is that he loves his children. Okay? Maybe the desire is because he has some important work that he really wants to finish. That's the Dasamsha. Whereas loving his children would be the Saptamsha. Or maybe he feels like what he's doing is really worth living for because he has a good Navamsha. But there's other things that will help him stay alive besides the condition of his body. You know? We see this a lot in movies where somebody pulls through because of their will to live. But this literally happens in real life. People who have some things going for them in life, that are excited about certain things in their life, get better faster. They recover faster. Even if they're on the same diet, with the same physical constitution, they'll live healthier and they'll overcome disease better. And they'll be able to take more bullet shots before they die. Because whether Mars is going to just let them die or not is not just based on Mars and the Trimsamsha. So it's the Vimshopak that helps us see that. Okay? Even though Mars can't do anything based on his Trimsamsha position, based on the charts that support the Trimsamsha, which are the Shadvargas, you'll remember. Here's that table again. In the Shadvargas, these are the things that give value. The Rashi gives 6/20ths, the Hora 2/20ths, the Drekana 4/20ths, the Navamsha 5/20ths, the Dwadasamsha 2/20ths, and the Trimsamsha 1/20th. So Trimsamsha is not even worth that much. Okay? So if you just said, oh, Mars is starved in the Trimsamsha, debilitated, it's alarmed, it can't do anything useful, it only can give its bad stuff in the Trimsamsha, therefore you are going to die when Mars Dasha hits. Okay, that would be the prediction. However, this person made it through Mars Dasha. No problem. Okay? Even though Mars was debilitated and here, he didn't die. The reason is because of Vimshopak. Mars' Vimshopak was 10.5, which allows Mars to have 26.3 points from the Sun and 31.5 points from Jupiter, and only 19.8 bad ones from Mercury. So Mars actually does pretty good, and they didn't have near-death experiences in Mars Dasha. They weren't terribly ill in Mars Dasha or any of that kind of stuff. Okay? They actually had, in many ways, a decent Mars Dasha, including with their physical health, which the Trim Samsha has to do. So we need to analyze the planets in the context of the entirety of the life in a holistic way. And Vimshopak helps us do that. That's why it's Vimshopaka that's calculated into these tables. And why it's not the Deeptati Avastas that are programmed into these tables. Because if they were, you would be predicting extremes that aren't happening. Okay? Now in this Trim Samsha, you could safely say, wow, your body is got no juice to keep up. However, you're vitalizing yourself because of your partner. Because Mars is in, well, it's only a neutral sign there. Let's find a place where Mars is in a good dignity here. In the D45, it's in the own house. Oh, we have to look in okay, the Drekana is the key one. Okay, the Drekana is the key Varga because it's in the own house there, and the Drekana contributes to the Trim Samsha score in a big way, 4. So, more than anything, what's helping keep him alive is Mars is an own sign in the Drekana. So, it's his associates, his connections with his quote-unquote brothers, and his, literally his passion for what he shares with his quote-unquote brothers that keeps this guy alive, that kept him energized, vitalized during the Mars Dasha. Meeting this person, what you'll notice about them is they come off as very fiery. Mars is in the first house after all. They're super excited about getting together with you, about the things that you're into. They have their network of people who are into that stuff. They are always doing something with the companion. They have this area of life that just charges them up. And by a companion, I mean they're doing it with somebody. Okay? And they're really fired up about their life because of their associates, their Drekana. Okay? And the drive that they have to do things in conjunction with other people, with their teammates. Okay? And like if you met this person, it doesn't matter how busy they are, where they're having to go, they will stop there and spend time focused on you. And if there's anything mutual you have with them, they want to be there and talk about it and do it. With all this martial energy that you just can't help but notice. However, if you're not into the things that they want, they'll try to recruit you and get you on, oh, you got to get into this, and you might not want to, and then you'll want to run away. Because they will try to recruit you onto their team and to being one of their teammates, which is what Drekana is all about. So that Mars is making up for this. That's where Mars is getting the majority of its good points. So wherever they get the fire or the health of the planet back, wherever they get the energy of a planet, doesn't matter. It's going to percolate throughout their lives in accordance with the system of Vimshopak, which we started this course with. Okay? So it's really, really important to not just say, oh, yeah, Mars is debilitated. You're only getting the starvation of Mercury in the Trim Samsha, therefore you will die. What you would say is, your body has nothing to offer you now. Your body is weak. Let's see what's helping you stay alive. And then you look through the other Vargas. Or just look at the Vimshopak and say, oh, but your Vimshopak's 10.5. You have enough good things going on with Mars that you're going to be vitalized and stay alive anyway. Okay? That's why it's the Vimshopaka that's calculated in here. You'll find the Vimshopaka is going to neutralize a lot of stuff, meaning it's going to make everything average. Because look at Vimshopaka. It so often hovers around the normal number, 10.5, 9.3. It's when you see a Vimshopaka that's super low, like this Jupiter 6.8, or this Venus 19 super high. That's when you get a planet that's very unusual. okay, that goes to extremes. Remember this Venus? It's how bad its Lajitati Vashas were, 9.2, right? And in the Shad Bala, just 93. Not nearly enough to cover its responsibilities. However, look at the Vimshopak of Venus, 19 points. 17 points in the Saptamsha, 19 points in the Trimsamsha. Wow, that Venus is really energizing this person because it mostly just gives its good avashtas, as you can see in this chart. Look how good it's ending up giving. So when you see a planet start going to those extremes, you really need to pay attention to it. And so he's had a lot of good Venus stuff. Venus, even though it starts out with not a lot of delight, the circumstances of their life is, he's really lucky. Venus has got great circumstances, great Vimshopaka. The circumstances are there to get the delight and not worry all that much about the negativity. Okay? Not that the negativity will be there. It'll be there at times. But you wouldn't say, oh, you're always going to be starved in love. You're never going to have a happy marriage. You're never going to be happy with your woman. This person married a younger woman when they were 29 and had a business with them for 13 years where they worked together in a business they loved together. That's way more partnership than most people have with somebody. Then they got divorced. Didn't last forever. But it was 19 years of real partnership, of actually not just living together and having sex and going out to movies, but really working together, building a life together, being partners in a huge way. Okay? So that's why Vimshopaka is programmed into here. It gives you that well-rounded look of what the planet's really going to do. But in knowing that, you still want to read the chart based on the Deep Tati. You want to go over to the Trim Samsha and say, oh, in the Trim Samsha, Mars is debilitated, which means he's alarmed, which means he can't offer anything in the Trim Samsha. And so your body has no hope in Mars, period. You're going to be vitalized not because of your biology, because of your physical machine. You're going to be vitalized because of where Mars is picking up the points from other places. Okay? One of those is the Drekana. The other one would be the Rashi, the Hora, the Navamsha, and the Dwadasamsha. But of those, the Mars is doing best in the Drekana, and he's not good in the Dwadasamsha, which means no, don't get this person talking about their parents in Mars Dasha, right? In the Navamsha, it's neutral, it's just mediocre. It's getting most of it in that Drekana, and it's getting enough to come out better than half. Okay? So, while the Diptadi Avashta will tell the story in the Varga. For instance, a common story you'll see is a planet doing really bad in the Navamsha, bad Diptadi Avashta, so it's in the Navamsha it's not giving anything, and they're not feeling any great purpose in life in that Dasha. But they're still going about their lives because the Vimshopak gets picked up in other places. And so they keep moving forward in life, even though a big part of them feels like, doesn't know why they're doing what they're doing, doesn't feel like their life is having any real meaning, but they're still moving forward because of the Vimshopaka of the full planet. Okay? So you'll see that more as we do more chart examples, okay, as we continue to work with more charts. But it's really important to understand that I went back and forth. Do I want to program the Deep Tati Avashtas into these tables? Well, no, because then I'm going to get these extremes. You'll get these extremes of Mars being so bad, but then Mars Dasha run and it won't be that bad in the Trim Samsha, because what a planet does is not based just on that Varga. It's based on that planet as a whole. The hardest thing to do in astrology is look at things in a holistic fashion. It's hard to do because with astrology we're basically breaking a person down into tons of little components, tons of little parts. But when we read the person, we have to put as many of the parts together as possible to do the reading. If we read it little part by little part, we'll say all these things that won't be right. So we have to break it down. You take the holistic person, break it down into parts that we can understand, And then we have to holistically put them all together, as many as we can together, and then give the correct reading, the correct interpretation. And the way to do that is by following this Vimshopaka roadmap of how Vargas are connected, what Vargas are giving more emphasis. Like, for instance, the Navamsha gives 5 points. So if the Navamsha person has no strength in the Trimsamsha, no strength in the Navamsha, no strength in the Rashi, if it's not getting any Vimshopak strength there, then that planet's going to be so weak in Vimshopaka in the Trimsamsha that, yeah, their body's not doing good. They're not really doing good with themselves, the Rashi, and they aren't really focused on a career. They don't feel any purpose in life, any meaning to it all. The Navamsha is bad. So yeah, the body takes over and they might actually just die. But if they're picking up a lot of points in those Vargas will keep them alive no matter what happens to them physically. And the doctors say, well, it's a miracle you're alive. Because there was a reason they stayed alive beyond just their biological ability to stay alive. All right, we'll see concrete examples of all this as I keep working with examples. I just wanted to convey the idea of the tables and what's done this way, that it's done in the tables. A lot of people are going to be wishing that I just showed you the Diptadi Avashta results in the tables, but then people would jump to extreme conclusions and make a lot of bad predictions. But so you have to read it. You have to go to the Varga and say, oh, in that Varga, the planet is in this Diptadi Avashta, which means this. You have to know that. I expect you to learn how to do that and learn what the Diptadi Avashtas are. And you won't be able to just go to a table and get the final number and then make a bad prediction that doesn't work out. You have to know your way around the chart, because as you walk around the chart, that's when you start pulling the chart into a picture of a reading versus just rattling off some nonsense off a table, which will get you in trouble all the time, and which I didn't want to create tables that would allow you to fall into that trap. As we continue with this chart in the next video, I will be showing more examples to see how we can work these, how we work these tables, how we work the Diptadi Avashtas, and how it pulls together a picture of the person's actual life in a really clear, detailed way. Okay? All right. But this, I hope, answers questions about all these tables that we have here and why they're done the way they're done. Okay, thank you.